Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, a report into allegations of abuse against boys as young as 11 years old in Rochdale has found that there were lost opportunities to prosecute the city's former MP, Cyril Smith. Following the report, the CPS has said that presented with the same evidence today, it is likely that charges would be brought against the politician who died in 2010. Meanwhile, Labour has suspended serving Rochdale councillor Richard Farnell after the report accused him of lying while giving evidence to the inquiry. The report concluded that the authorities had failed to adequately protect children from abuse.
There was a view amongst many of the staff that the sexual abuse of children was normalised, and that where children as young as 11 were being abused, both within Northview and within public laboratories within the town centre, that was the responsibility of those children, not of the authorities that were there to look after them.
Sky News has spoken to one man who's now nearly 70, who says that he was abused by Cyril Smith while he was living at Cambridge House Boys Hostel as a teenager.
I was told to go in that quiet room, and in I went. I was told to take my clothes off. I did as I was told. First instances I thought of was that was the norm. I didn't know anything different. I didn't find out later that he was a councillor or an alderman or a mayor or whatever he was. I thought it was something to do with being a nurse or a medical side.
Well, a report into allegations of abuse of young boys in Rochdale, as I was saying, has found that opportunities were missed to prosecute the city's former MP, Cyril Smith. Let's talk to Gabrielle Shaw. She's the Chief Executive of the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. And Gabrielle joins me now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
This wasn't a long time ago, Gabrielle, that this report found that in 1998 and 1999, opportunities were lost to charge and prosecute Cyril Smith. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's staggering to read the report and know that while many of his potential victims were still alive, and while he indeed himself was still alive, this was missed. As to how it happened, there was a decision for the public prosecution at the time, and I don't know why they didn't make that decision. As we've just heard, presented with the same evidence today, the Crown Prosecution Service said that there will be evidence to proceed with a charge. So reading that, you can only conclude that perhaps it was yet again the protection or reputation of high-ranking individuals over the protection and safeguarding of children. And that's something that we know happens again and again, and it's just so sad that opportunity was missed.
You say it happens again and again. I mean, do you think that that is something that could happen today?
Potentially, I think, but I think there's less chance of it today. I mean, the heightened scrutiny, and with all the media spotlights coming onto abuse examples, I think it's less likely. But what this report from ICSA, and I can just say what a powerful, hard-hitting report it is. It demonstrates that people would prefer to look the other way than actually act on their doubts or act on the information that comes to hand. And if we can learn anything, in the hackneyed phrase, lessons will be learned, it's not to look the other way and she put the priority on protecting children and those most vulnerable.
It is a very hard-hitting report. It's difficult to read, difficult to hear, listen to the victim that we spoke to. It says boys as young as 11 were not regarded by those in authority as victims, but as authors of their own abuse. Given the climate that we live in today, do you think that sort of mentality has changed?
I think has changed to a large degree. Whether it's changed entirely, I would be more doubtful. But yes, that phrase in the report, that children were regarded as authors of their own abuse, and that sexual abuse was experimentation in one of the schools, in Northview School. It was some pair-on-pair abuse, boys abusing each other, but that was just regarded as normal. And that's the key. If you normalise abuse, if you look the other way, then you're never going to change things, and the protection won't happen.
Labour have suspended the serving Rochdale councillor Richard Farnell after the report accused him of lying when he was giving evidence. Do you think it's right that he's been suspended?
I think it's absolutely right, yes, and I think that's a surprise it's taken this long. I mean, the information has been out in the public domain for quite a long time, and, you know, it may be argued that they were waiting for this report to come out, and in which case, fair enough. But the report from the inquiry makes no bones about it. It's forensic, the level of detail it's gone and the evidence that they've considered, and the conclusion that they've reached that he did lie on a statutory inquiry, on a public hearing, to lie as the report says he did. It's very serious, and I also understand that there may be a police investigation launched into him as well. So let's await what happens there.
In 1988, Cyril Smith received a knighthood. Do you think that he should be stripped of that knighthood now?
Yes, personally, yes, I do, because it was interesting to read in the report that the Honours Committee knew about the allegations and knew what was happening, but there was no concern for the victims. Rather, it was, if we give Cyril Smith a knighthood, could that potentially bring the honours system into disrepute? Now, that's staggering to think of, that the most important consideration in their mind to give him a knighthood was about the potential embarrassment to the British government and to the actual knighthood itself. So yes, does he deserve to have that knighthood? No, I don't think so, and so he should be stripped of it.
Gabrielle, you work with people who have been abused in childhood. How do you think this sort of a report will help them in their journey in moving forward, in getting any closure in what happened to them as children?
Yeah, I think it's a very important step forward. And we have to remember it's not a criminal case, so it's not a criminal court. So what many survivors of abuse who call NAPAC and talk about what happened to them, what they want is justice until their day in court and so forth. So this doesn't actually provide that.
It's difficult though. Cyril Smith died in 2010.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the people, those victims of Cyril Smith will not get that justice for him. But what the report does do, and why it's important, is it acknowledges that the abuse happened. And so I think what many survivors may feel is that, yeah, so because I wasn't the only one, and I am believed, and I think that could do a lot to actually help people to come to terms with what's happened to them and to possibly seek help in whatever way they feel most comfortable with.
Okay, Gabrielle Shaw from NAPAC, thanks a lot for talking to us.
Thank you.
Other news for you now, a report into allegations of abuse against boys as young as 11 in Rochdale has found that there were lost opportunities to prosecute the city's former MP, Cyril Smith. Following the report, the CPS has said that, presented with the same evidence today, it's likely that charges would be brought against the politician who died in 2010. Following the report's publication, Labour has suspended serving Rochdale councillor Richard Farnell after the report authors accused him of lying while giving evidence. Meanwhile, the current chief executive of Rochdale Borough Council has apologised after the report concluded that the authorities had failed to adequately protect children from abuse.
The council has apologised and acknowledged that children were failed. I repeat that apology today and say again that we are truly sorry. This report doesn't make the council look good. The council failed in a number of very serious ways during that period. I am confident that the situation today is very, very different and that we are much better placed to protect children.
Well, Sky News has spoken to one man who is now nearly 70 who says he was abused by Cyril Smith while he was living at Cambridge House Boys Hostel as a teenager.
I was told to go in that quiet room, and in I went. I was told to take my clothes off. I did as I was told. First instances I thought of was that was the norm. I didn't know anything different. I didn't find out later that he was a councillor or an alderman or a mayor or whatever he was. I thought it was something to do with being a nurse or a medical side.
Meantime, a report into allegations of abuse against boys as young as 11 in Rochdale has found there were lost opportunities to prosecute the city's former MP, Cyril Smith. The CPS has said that presented with the same evidence today, it is likely that charges would be brought against the politician who died in 2010. Since that report, Labour has suspended serving Rochdale councillor Richard Farnell, who the report authors accused of lying while giving evidence. Meanwhile, the current chief executive of Rochdale Borough Council has apologised after the report concluded that authorities had failed to adequately protect children from abuse.
The council has apologised and acknowledged that children were failed. I repeat that apology today and say again that we are truly sorry. This report doesn't make the council look good. The council failed in a number of very serious ways during that period. I am confident that the situation today is very, very different and that we are much better placed to protect children.
Let's bring in Maggie Oliver, a former detective constable for Greater Manchester Police. She worked on the Rochdale sex grooming investigation but later resigned from the force, saying they had failed the abused victims. Thank you for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Your views on the conclusions of this report?
I haven't read the full report as yet, but for me, this is another report that repeats the same pattern that we've seen recently. You know, an apology, empty words, actions for me speak louder than words. And to hear, you know, Richard Farnell, who was the head of Rochdale Council, say, you know, that he didn't know what was going on. These people, like Richard Farnell, like chief constables, they are people who are paid to know what's going on in their organisations. And ultimately, when things go wrong, for me, the book should stop with them. They, you know, maybe they give an apology, but we never see anybody held to account. What I would like to see is for accountability and for consequences to follow from those people in positions of power who are paid to protect and to know what's going on, to be held accountable when they fail.
Professor Jay said she hoped the inquiry had acknowledged victims' suffering. Do you accept that?
I think that the families of the victims will feel that they have finally been believed. Those families have known for many years what had happened to their children. I personally know families who have had children who have been abused in Knollview, children who have subsequently died, and they have been, the children were ignored at the time. The families' allegations and complaints to the council and to the police were never investigated. The sad thing for me is that now, almost 30 years on, we are week by week hearing of similar patterns of behaviour and failures about, you know, children, victims still not being believed, allegations not being investigated properly. The people at the top of these organisations are still never being held to account, and that is the thing that concerns me. And I think the public of this country know that words are very easy. What we need to see is consequences for those people in positions of power and influence to be held accountable, to know that if they've walked away from a job knowingly having failed in their duty, that, you know, the authorities can go after them. They can take the pensions away from them. They can be prosecuted for gross criminal neglect. And I feel personally that until that happens in this country, we will continue to see these same failures, maybe in another 10 or 20 years' time.
Do you still think that there are the remnants of protection that saved Sir Cyril Smith on more than one occasion? Do you think they are still there, or the remnants of them?
I believe that the people in positions of authority in many organisations protect each other before they will protect the people that they are meant to serve. I also believe that unless the full force of the law is brought to bear on them when they are exposed of having failed in their duty, that those patterns of behaviour will not change. The people at the top of these organisations, such as chief constables and council leaders, they are very powerful leaders. They are very powerful people in positions of influence. Baroness J did, in my opinion, a great job in Rotherham. I would like to see action following on from this inquiry. I would like to feel it's not just more empty words where action doesn't follow.
And those that felt and feel that they have not been heard, that they have not been listened to, what crumbs of comfort do you think that they can take away from today's findings, today's report?
All I think is that finally, after all these years, there is a public acknowledgement that they were speaking the truth when they were saying that their children were being abused in Knoll View. The public acknowledgement of that truth will go some way to comforting them, although it will never take away the consequences of that abuse for the surviving victims or indeed those who have already lost their lives.
OK. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
An inquiry into the sexual abuse of young boys in Rochdale says the local council failed to keep children safe for 25 years. The new report said the former council leader, Richard Farnell's claim that he was unaware of child sex abuse defied belief. Judith Moritz's report contains some scenes you may find upsetting.
There was this man there, I can only describe it, enormous. I was only small for my age then.
He's a pensioner now, but once he was a vulnerable child in care where he faced Cyril Smith.
He asked me to take my pants down. And I had to turn around and face the wall. And he started bringing his hands up the inside of me. My legs.
This was years ago.
Yes.
The pain is still very sharp.
I mean, I'm 70 now, and I'm still feeling the pain and suffering as I did.
As councillor, mayor, then MP, Cyril Smith wielded power and influence. He was never charged. Smith helped found Knoll View, a school for troubled boys. For 25 years, staff abused pupils and sex between boys was thought normal. The independent inquiry found that former council leader Richard Farnell lied on oath when he denied knowing about the abuse.
So you were completely and utterly oblivious to what was going on at Knoll View for all of those years?
All those people you mentioned did not bring that to my attention.
Mr Farnell says he did not lie, but the report authors are firm.
Clearly, that is a matter now for others to take forward, but the panel are very clear that they felt that he had lied in his evidence giving to the inquiry.
Might be a matter for the police.
Indeed, it might be a matter for the police.
Rochdale has lurched from one scandal to the next, from Cyril Smith in the 60s up till the more recent grooming of teenage girls. And there are many here who feel that the town can't move on until the full truth is told.
Rochdale Council has apologised for failing children. The police say they'll consider whether to take action. Judith Moritz, BBC News.
Now, the former leader of Rochdale Council has been suspended from the Labour Party after a report from an inquiry into child sexual abuse said that he lied when giving evidence. Richard Farnell continues to insist that he was not told about allegations of abuse spanning 3 decades at residential schools in the borough. But the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse said it was shameful that he had refused to accept responsibility for young lives blighted in the town. Dozens of allegations of abuse emerged after the town's former MP, Cyril Smith, died in 2010. Ed Hauker has this report.
He's my only son and he's not had a life.
Linda Phillips has spent 20 years finding out what happened at Knoll View School. Her son was 8 when he started there, and unlike other pupils, he wasn't sexually exploited. Instead, she says, he was beaten by the teachers.
He was physically abused day after day after day. It's devastated his life. I was a single mum, what power did I have to stop them doing it? I tried, I went everywhere and I tried.
This is a story about abuse perpetrated over decades at a residential school for what they called maladjusted boys. Here are the facts. Knollview School was founded by councilmen who were suspected sexual predators. There, teacher David Higgins abused boys. There, an intruder entered the premises. His name was Rodney Hilton. He abused boys. And there, and I'm quoting, boys as young as 11 were seen as authors of their own abuse. That's the conclusion of this, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. It says that Rochdale Council's response was wholly inadequate. As well it might have been. Cyril Smith founded Knollview School. Smith, apparently a jovial juggernaut, ran Rochdale for decades, first as council leader and then as MP. He chaired the committee that set up Knollview, but incredibly, by the time the school opened, Smith was already under police investigation for child abuse. In 2013, Channel 4 found the police file. It concluded, while sheltering beneath a veneer of respectability, he's used his unique position to indulge in a sordid series of indecent episodes with young boys. The file warns about another man who raised the suspicions of police, Councillor Harry Wilde, and he became chairman of the governors at Knollview. Abuse started early at this school, but by 1991, Knollview was plainly dysfunctional. A nurse who visited filed a horrified report. Channel 4 News tracked him down in 2013.
It wasn't being stopped. Had I received that report on my desk as a member of social services, education, whatever, I would have visited the writer of the report to talk to them about it and to at least give some feedback.
The Child Abuse Inquiry's principal criticism is that the council failed to face these problems, and the inquiry names names. Among social workers and other politicians, two stand out. Former council leader and MP Paul Rowan, the inquiry says he bore considerable responsibility. But the inquiry states that this man lied. Ex-council leader Richard Farnell, who they say claimed to know nothing about the school's problems in the 1990s and refused to accept responsibility. Richard Farnell apologised and said,
I am shocked at the findings of the inquiry. I told the truth. There is clear evidence that I was not informed about Knollview during my time as leader.
Today, he was suspended by the Labour Party. Rochdale Council apologised and said,
While the inquiry found no evidence of cover-ups or political pacts, it is clear from its report that council officers and school staff failed in their most basic duty of care towards children.
So now there's a new history. But what about justice?
I want to see those that have covered it up. I want to see those that have lied in this report. I want to see their comeuppance. I want to see them driven out of town, really.
If you could say something to all of those men, what would it be?
Shame on you. Shame on you for what you did to those kids.
Ed Halker there reporting from Rochdale.